Hey, it's Mark with Idaho History, and I want to tell you about the Pineros, or forest workers that were brought in on H-2B visas after 1986 to work in the forests of America, including Idaho. And these guys were hard-working dudes that got treated kind of shitty. And so the H-2 visa program goes back to 1952 when they brought, largely from Central America, Mexico, South America, workers in to do jobs that many Americans didn't want to do, and many of these were agricultural jobs. But in 1986, they broke the H-2 visa program into two, H-2B and H-2A. H-2A being agriculture, but H-2B being stuff like childcare, in-home care, lawn care, but also it could be these forest workers that came in to work with the Department of Labor and the Forest Service. And the work was grueling. Let me tell you, these guys would go up, these Pineros, they would go up into the Bitterroots, the Clearwater River area, and they would just clear brush, dry brush, dead trees, things that could cause forest fires. And they also planted saplings, and many of them, and they worked their asses off. In fact, these private companies would exploit the shit out of them. They contracted with the government to get these workers in, paid them $7 to $13 an hour for this back-breaking labor, but it was good pay for these guys from these other countries. But the thing is that it wasn't good enough for the employers, and so many of them would try and trim down those guys' wages however possible, and they weren't appropriately paid. And because they were so exhausted from, sleeping 5 to a room, sometimes a few to a bed, like 3 to a bed, they didn't have proper shelter when they were working up in the mountains in the cold or in the heat. They didn't have water. They didn't have proper food. Many of these guys started poaching. And, an employer would jot down 8 hours when they, in fact, worked 12. Or they planted 500 saplings instead of 1,500 or 2,000. And injuries were rife. And so this guy didn't have proper safety goggles. And he almost got his eye taken out. They didn't give him stuff. And when they did, they took it out of their pay. They took the food out of their pay, the cost for shelter, the cost for their chainsaws and gas, and etc. And they would try to keep months of wages, which amounted to $600 for one of these guys. Huge money for them, little for the employer. But the employers argued that they had to, do such practices to make the bottom line. They'd even hold these guys' visas hostage. Employers try to argue and make excuses. But, largely there's a lot of evidence to say this happened and it was rampant. And these guys still come to the United States today. And, programs to keep these guys safe or legislation hasn't really come to fruition for H-2B workers. And what's true in The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck is true today for these Forest Service workers at their peak, 130,000 plus on H-2B visas.